Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at color correction in Premiere Pro. Now, I've got some footage pulled up. This is from a short film I worked on, and we shot this on GH5S in log. And now, looking at this footage, you might think to yourself, it doesn't look great. Everything's very flat. And that's because we shot in a log profile. So there's not a whole lot of saturation, not a whole lot of contrast. And what it's going to do is give us the ability in post to really have as much control as possible over our image and really maximize the dynamic range that the camera captured. Okay, so we're in the color workspace and I have my Lumetri scopes pulled up over here. I am using Parade and Waveform. And then we have our Lumetri color panel over on the right side. Um, and we'll kind of take a look at a few things. Um, I'm mostly going to work in curves. Now, within curves, we have our overall luminance curve and then our individual color channels, red, green, and blue. And down below, we have a lot more control options with hue versus saturation. We're not going to get into that as much today. We're going to focus mostly on color correction and not so much grading, because there is a difference. Color correction is when you're bringing your footage to like a standard workspace or a standard color space like Rec 709 or Rec 2020 if you're working with HDR footage. And then grading is going beyond that and applying looks to your video. I'm going to start off just with our luminance curve here and keeping an eye on our scopes. If you're not too familiar with this, we have our overall waveform, which is all of our channels combined. And then we have an RGB parade. And this is the values of each of our color channels split so we can see each of them separately. Now, this top line up here is 100% of that value, and 0 is 0% of that value. Coming back over to the curves, I'm just going to click to create a point, and I'm going to start with my blacks. And then I'm going to come up, do the same thing in my highlights, and just make a simple S curve. And what I'm trying to do is create a wide range. And this is where we're getting a lot of our contrast back in the image. If you look at this compared to what it was, we have a lot more contrast, some more saturation, especially you see the red bar above our actor's head here. And this is a dark shot altogether. So we're not really reaching too high. Now, if we look at this, ideally for a corrected image, all of our RGB levels would be even. So if we look, we're at a slope here, and we have a lot more red than we do green or blue as far as our highs. Everything else looks pretty close, but this image altogether is kind of flat. So now we can do a few things. We can either boost our blue and green channel to match the red, or we can bring our red channel down. So as we bring our red channel down, and it's starting to match more, keeping an eye on our scopes. Let's do the same or the opposite with blue. And this looks like probably a properly white balanced shot. Probably daylight balanced, looks like 56K. And our levels over here on our scopes are pretty even. So this might be a good starting point. Let's take a look at one of our other clips. Already off the bat, this one is pretty close as far as all of our RGB values, but we're still pretty flat, as in there's not a lot of range. With contrast, there's not a lot of saturation. So we'll go back to our curves and our luminance, and we'll make that same S curve. All right. So that's a little better. A pretty good starting point. Bring up our blues in the mids just a little bit to help balance out that shot. And we'll move on. Now, this project as a whole was pretty dark. We were shooting in a basement. We only used 2 light panels and a few light bulbs. And so our values aren't going to reach the full range for a lot of this stuff, mostly because our backgrounds in a lot of these shots are going to be really dark. So that's why a lot of our image is pulled towards the bottom. But when I'm going through and I'm doing, especially the start of correction, things I'm really going to pay attention to are skin tones and what people's faces especially look like. And this is just more of, if I'm correcting something, and see right here, we're pulling a lot of blue out, our skin tones look off, and there's something that's not right about it. And if you're working in these curves and everything, and especially most of the stuff in Lumetri, and you ever make an adjustment and you want to undo it, of course, you can always Control or Command Z, but you can also double click and it will reset that parameter. And even though we're working in curves, since we're working on our separate color channel curves, it will only reset that channel. So my luminance curve, for example, is still untouched. And let's check our last one real quick. Okay. I think we're at a pretty good place. Now, alternatively, we can come up to the basic correction. And if you need to do something like reset white balance on your shot, we have a selector tool where if you shot using a slate or a clapboard, there is true white on that. And you can use this dropper tool to select that white, and it will white balance the shot based on that value. You also have manual control, so we can adjust the overall temperature of our clips just from here. And then if we have something like a magenta shift, this is our greens and magenta, we have control over that as well. But all of our clips are in a pretty good place. And this is all just very quick, very simple curve adjustments, really just adding contrast back into our shots. Now, there is one other way that we can do this, and it's even faster than what we have just done. And I am going to copy this clip just for example real quick. And to do that, I just hold Alt and click and drag up, and it will create a duplicate. So I'm going to take this one, I'm going to come over to Effects Controls, and I'm going to delete that instance of. So everything is reset. I'm going to come up to Color Correction, and this time we're going to use an input LUT. Now, a LUT stands for Lookup Table, and this is basically a pre-designed color space. And there are two different kinds of LUTs. Just like color correction and color grading, there are correctional LUTs and there are grading LUTs. And so with this, to take it from log to a standard color space, say a Rec 709, we can use a correctional LUT to do that. So there's very few that Adobe comes preloaded with, but I have some of my own. So I'm going to go through and we'll be using some from Lutify Me. They have a ton of really great LUTs, but for this one, we know we shot this in Panasonic V Gamut or Panasonic V Log. So the one that we're looking for is this Panasonic V-Log to Rec 709 because this is the color space that we want to work in. So I'm just going to select that, click open, and there we go. That's it. If we're trying to get our footage to Rec 709 to a standard space, that's all you have to do. If you have those LUTs available, and most camera companies and camera manufacturers have those LUTs. So depending on whatever camera you're using, check out their website and see if they have LUTs to take your footage from a log to a Rec 709. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.